Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, it's a little choppy.
Okay,
But-
sorry about that.
Oh,
Council
fine.
Member Kelly,
Here.
Council Member Braithwaite, Council Member Nguyen,
Here.
Council Member Nusma,
Here.
Council Member Burns,
Here.
Council Member Sufferdon,
Here.
Council Member Ravel,
Here.
Council Member Reed,
Here.
Council Member Fleming,
Here.
Mayor Biss.
Here.
Have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to, today, our meeting, we will have an executive session. We're going to deal with two related items up at the top because we have guests here. That should take about 10 minutes, and then we will go into exec. And we'll also have public comments. So we'll start with public comment. Dar or Kelly, do you have the public comment list?
I do.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question, Councilmember Reed?
Sure.
I think I've told you before, I did not plan for this meeting, as any of us did, so I cannot stay very long. I would like to try to get through executive session and speak of the personnel matters. Is it possible to do that first and then the continuation of the meeting? Because I can't stay, I have a hard stop, and so I need to be diligent with my time if people can make that concession.
That's a motion. I second it.
I guess I can make an official motion. I don't know what the two first orders of business are, but if we can have executive session first and come back.
Yeah, we have a guest from the law firm Elrod Freeman to briefly talk about updates to OMA for 2022. That should only take a few minutes. You know, the time that we're spending now is probably just as much time as we use in the just get.
All right, well, just so then for the public record, I cannot stay for the whole meeting. As you know, we don't usually have meetings on Wednesday, and I had another engagement, so hopefully I can participate in the executive session, but
Cicely, what is your hard stop?
I would like to be done by 7:30.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, 7 would be more ideal, but I would do what I can.
Yeah. Thank you.
Kelly, can we do public comment?
Yes. I have Mary Rosinski. Mary, are you there? And we'll come back to her. Second speaker is Mike Vasilko.
Okay.
I'm here. So I had comments on three things. R1, this question about persons on the reparations committee benefiting from the funds available in the reparations fund is, I don't agree with that. If there's a problem with somebody who was put on the committee who is now or was eligible for funds, they shouldn't have been put on the committee. It's a conflict of interest. This would set a precedent, in my opinion, for other committees going down the road. So I'm strongly against that. That person or persons should just leave the committee, in my opinion, and that would resolve the conflict of interest. Also, on the discussion about elected officials' compensation, I've mentioned this before as far as my opinion goes. Council members and the mayor had an opportunity to discuss becoming full-time representatives, not part-time. And unfortunately, I don't think we can afford to pay elected officials more if we're going to keep a city manager type government. So I would say no to increasing any of the compensation for elected officials. And I guess I'm just curious I read the memo on filling, unfortunately, having to fill Cicely Fleming's seat. I don't understand a lot of some of it as who's approving this, corporate authorities, if somebody could explain who the corporate authorities are, I assume that's the council, or is that some legal group besides the council? Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go back to Mary Rosinski.
Hi, thank you. I was calling to talk about the PAC and the FOIA review. When I first looked at the agenda before the weekend, it appeared that there was only one attachment and it just had people's names on it, which seemed to me to be as somewhat awkward. It didn't bother me. My name's on it like 5 times because I do FOIA and I'm looking for transparency, but it seemed like that would be an intimidation to some people who did not want their name. I know all FOIAs people can see, but the PAC review FOIAs, I'm just wondering why they just didn't put the FOIA, the FOIA number from Evanston, and then the PAC review from the city. I don't see that there was really a need for a name. Since then, I do see that Clerk Mendoza, thank you, did put a performance report on the agenda item now, and it's a more thorough description of how many FOIAs met on time and all of that, and who wasn't, how many were not met, and all the different categories that should have been part of the first agenda report. But the reason I'm calling is if we are trying to review that because of are we being efficient with the FOIA system, I think they're doing a really pretty good job with it. But what I have known is that I'm going to be sending another PAC review because the Robert Crown Center, I asked for the rules for the Robert Crown Center, and that was denied because they're non-responsive. First of all, that FOIA was 3 weeks late, and then it was partially denied. And it says there's no responsive documents for the bylaws for the Friends of Crowns, which were referred to in the MOU, which means that somewhere in the city of Evanston, we do have those bylaws. And I am really puzzled why we would enter into a huge multi-million-dollar project with an organization, a nonprofit, that refers to the bylaws as part of the agreement and then not have it. So if we're going to track our FOIAs, let's make it easy for the clerk to get it by not arbitrarily denying information that we know we have, because legally we had to review it to do the MOU. So just moving forward, let's just try to keep it more transparent and quit denying partially reviews that then we have to go to PAC to get. And I'll be doing it again for other documents that the Friends of Crowns are denying the city of Evanston records on financial records. And we have a relationship with the Friends of Crown, and that building is costing us $5 million a year. I think everything's
Seconds.
completely transparent.
Yes, thank you.
So let's work on it. So thanks. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. And thank you, Kelly, for your time.
Yes, our final speaker looks like Ray Friedman.
Hello, Ray.
Hello, sorry. This is Ray Friedman, Second Ward. First, I want to say thank you to Mary and thank you to Mike for your comments. I agree with both of you. And so my questions, I'll turn to a different subject. So on R5, talking about the Open Meetings Act, my question is, I guess, what is the rules for the Open Meetings Act? My opinion is we never finished the TIF hearing. So to me, that is a violation of the Open Meetings Act. We started the TIF hearing. Shouldn't the TIF? So I'm asking this question for apparently the people who work with Elrod Friedman, and to clarify, shouldn't we finish that TIF hearing? Because in my mind, it was never finished. We were cut off. And is 30 seconds for each person speaking? Is that correct for a hearing, a public hearing, whether it's TIF hearing or TEFRA hearing or whatever? allowing people only to speak 30 seconds. I thought a hearing was you're talking about a specific subject, like TIF hearing, you're talking about $89 million. So are we supposed to complete that? That is a question for Mr. Friedman, okay, to hopefully clarify. And also, shouldn't it be a totally separate hearing? If you're having a TIF hearing or a TEFRA hearing, shouldn't it be a separate hearing, not part of a city council meeting, so that council can say, we don't have time? Really? You don't have time? You're the ones who set up this meeting, and you set it up before your council meeting. And then you tell us you only have 30 minutes to speak each because there's too many people that want to be involved in this. Well, it was never finished, and so I'm very interested to know what the Elrod Friedman and his associates have to say about the Open Meetings Act, and if this was correctly done, or should it be finished? In my opinion, it should be finished. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ray. That concludes. I'm sorry, Kelly. Does that conclude public
Yes.
comment?
Yes.
Okay. That concludes public comment. And just because we have our guest from Elrod Freeman, again, when we originally scheduled this meeting, we weren't going to have the executive session to discuss the city manager. So I do want to just, use our time there and have them present on updates to OMA for 2022. So I seek a motion for R5.
Waiting for a second.
Someone to move it for R5.
Mr. Chair, I'll move item R5 for discussion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm not sure exactly who is here from Elrod Freeman, but we know that there have been a number of updates to OMA, and council members may have a few questions. So we certainly want to hear those updates, as this committee is tasked with our enforcement currently of the Open Meetings Act.
Councilmember Reed, I'll introduce Steve Elrod, Marcus Martinez, and Brooke Lenneman of Elrod Freeman.
Thank you very much, Manager Gondurski. Appreciate it. Members of the Rules Committee, Mayor Biss, thank you, and Corporation Counsel Cummings. We're honored to be here tonight. Councilmember Reed asked us to focus on the Open Meetings Act, and in the interest of time, we have limited our presentation to two key issues concerning the Open Meetings Act. We had a PowerPoint. We're going to abandon the PowerPoint. We're going to just give the presentation directly to you to help you with your agenda and be very sensitive to your time concerns. You'll recall we were before you, at least Brooke Lenneman and I appeared before you in May and gave a more detailed presentation on a number of matters concerning municipal law, including the Open Meetings Act. Tonight, we're going to focus on remote meetings and the litigation exception to the Open Meetings Act. And let's jump right into it. Marcus Martinez, Marcus, if you could wave, is here, and Brooke Lenneman from my office. We're all here, and again, thank you for having us here. Remote meetings.
And I'd love if you guys can send us the PowerPoint at some point as well.
Absolutely.
If you have it. Yeah, thank you.
No problem at all. We will do so. So remote meetings, it's not new. Illinois has had the ability to attend meetings remotely for a number of years. But before the pandemic, the ability to meet remotely was very narrowly construed and it had a very narrow exception under Illinois law. Illinois was one of the strictest states in the country concerning remote meetings. In order to have a remote meeting, the public body had to have a written policy, which Evanston does. A physical quorum must be present at the meeting location. So you had to have a quorum present at your city hall. And then the only way that any individual member of the public body could appear remotely was if they fell into one of three categories. They were ill, they were on a family or other emergency, or they were away for business of the public body. No other reason was accepted. When the pandemic hit, Governor Pritzker issued an emergency order suspending that physical presence requirement. And for several months, and that was done back in March of 2020, but for several months after March, we all operated, including Evanston, under basically an emergency order exception to the Open Meetings Act. And then the Illinois State Legislature, when it was finally able to meet in June of 2020, officially amended the Open Meetings Act to allow for remote meetings, such as the one we are participating in tonight. Brooke is going to explain to you what the elements of the remote meeting. We're not going to go into detail. You know them. You've been following them. I see that you're following them well. But she's going to go into some of the more controversial areas that have come up in the Remote Meeting Act interpretation. I will tell you, if and when this pandemic is ever over, it is likely we're going to go back to the way the world was pre-March of 2020. There have been efforts to bills that have attempted to make this remote meeting possibility more permanent, or allow municipalities to determine if it wants to have a remote meeting. Both failed rather significantly in the state legislature. The media and bond counsel have both pressured the state legislature to oppose any further amendment that would make it more permanent, the ability to have a remote meeting outside of a pandemic or other emergency. So I don't see the likelihood of staying with this when this pandemic is ever over. All right, I'll turn it to Brooke to explain some of the controversies that have existed with remote meetings.
Thank you.
Everyone. So I'm not going to go through the elements of what you need to do to comply with 7E. I think you're all well aware of what those are. But we did think it would be useful and interesting to talk about, there's three main sort of controversies that are still being debated even amongst municipal lawyers. And we would give you our opinions about those three items, but there is real legitimate debate about these items. So of course you want to speak with your own court counsel on your town's opinion. But the first one is, can you close City Hall completely under 7E? So can you have an entirely remote meeting with no in-person attendance by the public? And our opinion on this is no. And this is a hotly contested one. But 7E4 says that meetings, members of the public that are present at the regular meeting location can hear the discussion and all votes of the public body. And then it says, unless attendance at the regular meeting location is not feasible due to the disaster, including issued disaster declaration. So this is, I mean, first of all, this is just bad language, and it's difficult to interpret because it's just not particularly well written. But that phrase, including the issued disaster declaration, we've interpreted that to mean that the governor needs to include in his declaration a finding that in-person meetings are not feasible. And he's done that in the past, which if you remember in past declarations, there was a statement or finding in the declaration that said in-person meetings of more than 10 people were not feasible, which functionally limited the size of public meetings. That language has since been removed from the past couple and the current declaration. So it's the governor's position that he can make these findings. So that's been our position on that one. The second controversy is 7E2, which requires the head of the public body to make a determination that in-person meetings are not practical or prudent. So that's one of these trigger moments. There has to be a declaration by the governor, and then there has to be a local determination by the head of the public body that in-person meetings are not practical or prudent. Now, the controversy here is who is the head of the public body? And can the mayor issue a determination that covers all of the bodies of the city? And our opinion of that is no. That when they say the head of the public body, they mean the head of each body of the city. So each committee or plan commission, the chair of those committees would need to make that individual determination. So does that mean that the city council, the mayor can make a determination for the city council and the chair of the plan commission can make a separate finding that in-person meetings are feasible? And yes, that is possible, that you could have two separate decisions. And of course, there's a practicality to that, which is that not all meetings of each public body are similar. So a plan commission meeting where you expect 300 people to attend may not be practical or prudent to have that meeting be in person. Whereas a much smaller meeting where the committee is, the commission is only 3 members and no one ever shows up from the public and it's a very small group, maybe you can have a safe meeting in person. So there's some practical aspect to that as well. And the third controversy is 7E5, which requires at least one of 3 people to be present at the remote meeting, which is either a member of the public body, the chief legal counsel, or the chief administrative officer. And the controversy here is who is the chief administrative officer? Technically, that's the city manager, and really only the city manager is the chief administrative officer of the city. But we've opined that the city manager can delegate that authority to, theoretically anyone, but the logical choice would be the staff liaison who normally attends those meetings. So that person is the chief administrative officer of that public body and can count as one of the 3 people that have to be there to satisfy 7E. So those are the 3 main things that are still being batted around and discussed even at this point of remote meetings. And so
we'll stop there on remote meetings. Councilmember Reed asked us if there were any recent case law decisions concerning the Open Meetings Act, and there has been one concerning the probable or imminent litigation exception, and Marcus Martinez is going to brief you on that.
Thank you, Steve. So to round out recent developments in the landscape of Open Meetings Act, I want to talk about the 2 cases or the 2 decisions that have been recently issued. That's PAC Opinion 21-3 and City of Bloomington versus Raul. That's a decision out of the 4th District. Generally speaking, there hasn't really been much else in terms of recent decisions related to the Open Meetings Act. The PAC also issued PAC Opinion 21-11, the subject matter of which Brooke already touched upon, so I won't go into that. So the 2 cases I'm going to talk briefly about, they're going into closed session under the probable or imminent clause of the pending probable or imminent litigation exception. That's found in Section 2C11 of the OMA. It's important to mention that this exception is distinct from the other exceptions in that the public body must make a finding in order to go into closed session. For instance, if a public body were to go into closed session to discuss setting a price for the sale of real estate, they wouldn't have to first make a finding. If they were to go into closed session to discuss evidence that's been presented in an open hearing, they don't have to find that the evidence warrants discussion. But when a public body wishes to go into closed session to discuss probable or imminent litigation, they must first make a finding that that litigation is probable or imminent. In addition, the public body has to record the basis for that finding entered into the closed meeting minutes. So PAC 21-3. This was out of the city of Hillsborough. A property owner wanted to build a garage, and he found out that the city had a sewer main under that portion of his property with no easement. He asked to be placed on the city council's agenda to discuss this and was denied because the mayor responded that the city council intended to discuss it in closed session. There was no need to discuss it in open session. Now, the only time this property owner brought up anything remotely threatening litigation was when he asked whether he should bring an attorney to the meeting with the city. So that's it. In its analysis, the PAC found that the property owner had made comments that showed he was still interested in working with the city on this issue and that both parties were actively working together to reach a resolution. If these efforts were to fail, then perhaps things would get more litigious, but the possible breakdown of this joint effort is not enough to establish that litigation was probable or imminent. Now, similarly, City of Bloomington versus Raoul. Bloomington and Normal, the cities of Bloomington and Normal had an intergovernmental agreement which Bloomington wished to terminate. Bloomington City Council went into closed session by invoking the probable and imminent litigation exception. Bloomington's mayor began the closed session meeting by asking the city council how they could terminate this agreement. Bloomington's attorney stopped the discussion and advised the city council that they could not talk about how to terminate. However, the attorney reframed this issue as which of two options was more likely to end in litigation. This is still a misinterpretation of the probable or imminent litigation exception. Neither city at that time had filed suit. It was clear from the closed meeting discussion that avoidance or threat of litigation was the extent of the litigation, and Bloomington's attorney even categorized the litigation as plausible. Plausible is not probable, it's not imminent. So even if that exception had applied, the court found that the city council properly went into closed session because litigation was probable or imminent. The city council did not limit its discussion to topics within the scope of that litigation in the closed session. The court noted that there was no discussion of legal theories, no discussion of defenses, claims, possible approaches to litigation. The only commentary that did concern litigation was about the uncertainty of the outcome of litigation, how best to avoid a lawsuit, and whether either city had or could use the threat of litigation in the course of negotiation. So to put it simply, these two decisions confirm and emphasize that a public body may go into closed session by invoking the probable or imminent litigation exception when litigation is indeed probable or imminent, not when it's possible, not when it's plausible, not when it's threatened.
Use very cautiously is the bottom line. Members of the City Council, members of the Rules Committee, that is our abbreviated presentation. In the interest of time, if there is, if there are any questions, you can supply them. I have sent the PowerPoint to your corporation counsel, and he now has it and can distribute it to you. So thank you very much for the honor. And also, I should say thank you also for allowing us to serve as your ethics counsel. We are honored, and Brooke Lenneman is going to be intimately responsible for a lot of the work on that. So we thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And if there are any questions, it won't take more than 2 or 3 minutes, but if there are any questions now, if not, I'm sure we can supply them in writing or just direct them to our corporation counsel. So I will allow a few minutes for that. If not, we will go directly into exec. I do have one quick question. If you all can answer this. If an item does not appear on an agenda, is it your interpretation that that item can be discussed as long as final action isn't taken on it at that meeting?
That's generally our interpretation. I would again consult carefully with your corporation counsel, sure. But it's the final. The final action rule is not found in the Open Meetings Act. It was developed by case law, but that's generally our opinion.
Okay. And then lastly, maybe you can do this if you have anything off the top of your head, or in writing. But one of the questions I really had is, what, in your experience working with a number of municipalities and advising with OMA, where do you think the state law falls short and a municipality could, to live in the spirit of the law, take a few really important steps to increasing public access to meetings?
Boy, that's like a bar exam question. I appreciate it's an open-ended one. Councilmember Reed, I think each municipality is unique and different and has its own pulse. There are general rules of compliance, and I think that's what the Illinois Open Meetings Act does. It sets the bar. Many municipalities exceed it, many just meet it. And I think that that's a policy decision based on each municipality to municipality.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. If there are no further questions, I'm sorry, I didn't see if there were hands from the body. Then we will move on. In the interest of time, since the other guest is our clerk, and our clerk can be available to us at any time, we will skip that for now and just, if I can entertain a motion to move into executive session to discuss our city manager process. Thank you, Mr. Martinez, Mr. Leonardman, and Mr. Elrod.
Thank you all. Bye-bye now.
Yes. Councilmember Nusma, you've been our living in the spirit of the last fourth ward alderman, our person lead us into exec, so I'll rely on you, I guess.
And I don't have the language right here in front of me, so
okay.
I'll go from memory unless somebody else has it. I will make a motion to adjourn into executive session in accordance with Open Meetings Act, using the exception for litigation and for personnel matters.
So we're discussing. Okay. Yes. All those, or we have to do a roll call. Darlene, Ms. Franchel.
Councilmember Reed, just because we just had the presentation and I don't want to violate anything, I'm going to forward or make sure that Councilmember Newsman has the exact language, because I believe the citation statute has to be cited. It's going to be 1 second.
Thank you.
No problem. Yes, yeah, that makes makes sense. And,
Section 2C11 is the litigation exception, and I will wait for
12 is personnel.
Are we discussing litigation today? And
it's my understanding that it's just section 12 for personnel.
I thought there was litigation on the agenda as well.
That's for Monday.
Got it. Thank you for the correction.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
waiting
for the committee. It's important for the committee that is in charge of enforcing OMA or ensuring that OMA is followed here in the city to follow it ourselves. So, thank you, Nick, for highlighting that. And I do hope folks will be able to stick around after exec, because the item regarding reparations is, really important to do justice for some of our ancestors who chose to serve on the committee.
Had I known this was coming right up, I would have been prepared. Nick, you're
no.
Nick, it's on the way.
It's actually C1.
And shall I start?
5
ILCS
120.
120. And I think the requirement in OMA is that it just makes it into the minutes. But
120/2.
120/2.
C1.
C1. So I will make a motion to adjourn into executive session pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2 C1 to cover the topic of personnel.
Recess into second. Okay. With a motion and a second from Alderman Ravel and Alderman Newsome, Councilmember Newsome and Ravel. Ms. Franchel, can you call the roll for us to recess into executive session?
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn.
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sefferden.
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming.
Aye.
Mayor Biss. Mayor Biss.
Well, the ayes.
Aye. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank
Yes,
you.
we can hear you now. The ayes have it. We will now recess into executive session. The council members will be joining another link, which is available to folks, and then we will come back here. Okay, thank you. I will we'll go back into the Rules Committee agenda. May I have a motion? We have the clerk here who may have a motion for item R5, so we can dismiss our clerk.
Councilmember Reed, just want to make sure we have a quorum. I think we do.
2, 3,
Yes.
4, 5, 6, 7 coming out. Yep.
What's a quorum for rules?
Same as council, 6.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion on item R5 for discussion.
Great. Is there a second?
Didn't we do R5 before executive session?
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I mistaken?
Was it R6 then?
I'm sorry. R4.
R4.
My
I
apologies.
will make that motion on R4 for discussion.
Second.
Thank you. Clerk Mendoza. Oh, well, let me first introduce this. At a Rules Committee meeting a few months ago, there was a proposal. We wanted the council had questions about FOIA, sparked by a discussion that I initiated regarding creating a FOIA OMA committee. And so we're just getting an update. The council has also, in years previous, asked for annual updates from the clerk regarding FOIA. So this serves as both that annual update and specifically some information relating to questions that we had previously relating PAC determinations. So Clerk Mendoza, if you want to.
Yes, I tried to add a pretty detailed memo that I had sent to the city manager in the packet. I'm not sure how many of you got a chance to read that. If you look at our FOIA request in the last 8 months, and I did separate them between the last 8 months that I've been here in the office versus, I also put 8 months from before I was in the office. We have had quite an increase in FOIA requests, a 28.44% increase. But even with that increase and the same amount of staff, we've been able to lower our FOIA responses to an average of 5 days. That's at least a medium of 5 days and an average of 4 that we've been able to close those out. We have also been able to provide a next request training for staff just to get everybody on board. We're also having regular meetings with all the FOIA officers now just to make sure everyone is everyone who is a FOIA officer for the city of Evanston, we're all working cohesively and bouncing off ideas or ways to improve the way that we serve our residents and our staff, because we also do quite a lot of that here. And the other thing, and then also FOIA requests have had a 12.6% decrease in late responses after the initial, well, not late, they're technically not late, but they're been responded to before the extra 5 day extension that we are provided. Other than that, if you guys have any questions for me, I submitted both of the reports so you can give a side-by-side comparison. Does anybody have any questions?
I'll open it to the committee before I ask any questions. I just have a few.
I have a question. Do we have any idea
Sure.
how this compares to other municipalities if we're benchmarking ourselves?
No, I am part of a message board for clerks, and I more than happy to ask them if they have information or data about their municipalities. one of the things from attending the clerk's training, I think that we forget that we're one of the luckier municipalities. You know, we have a pretty good budget and the ability to have a program like Next Request. Most of the municipalities who attended that training with me, if maybe one other municipality, just Oak Park, had a program like the ones we have. So I can inquire, but I think the response I'm going to get is that a lot of other municipalities cannot afford to have a program like this.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, Chair, I have one.
Go ahead.
Just interested to the resolve by both parties, and I don't know if this information should not be disclosed or is protected in any way, but just interested to know if it was resolved in that the city decided to turn over the requested documents, or if the person that filed the PAC opinion.
Yeah, so I can, for quite a few of these resolved by both parties were actually after before my time here. I can have legal step in, but I can tell you that we have, just in our office alone, we have had situations where we've resolved issues with constituents. And as you know, 2 council members have actually sent 2 people who had issues. I had one from Councilmember Reed and one from Councilmember Kelly, 2 community members, and we were able to actually solve issues that people had, or information or questions that people had. Usually some of these is just us getting more clarification on what the person is asking for. You know, sometimes people, unfortunately, you know, they ask for everything under the sun, and that's not necessarily helpful, because we really, you know, we're caught in an area where we really don't know what the person wants. So it's just people clarifying what they need and talking to us providing more customer service, which was what I would call it, with the individual, and making sure we make them feel good about the service we're trying to provide to them. And Alex, if you have anything to add, of some of these are actually from before I was here, 2019 and 2020.
Yeah, I can jump in as
real quick, Chair, just so I can say one quick thing. I just want to make sure the response from everyone kind of applies directly to my question. So, and I appreciate the customer service you're doing, you know, just so for the, you know, for community members who haven't been around. I was a former interim deputy city clerk and worked on a lot on FOIA. And the customer service side of it, at least when we were there in the office, was kind of on the front end. So if we kind of use that initial process to try to narrow the scope of the request, and that had a lot of that happened with back and forth communication in Next Request to say, hey, look, you know, what you're submitting is unduly burdensome, and so we need you to narrow your request, and then there'd be some back and forth. Maybe we schedule a phone call where we can work that out. But these in particular, and so I just want to be clear, these in particular is like when someone, I would assume after all of that has took place, and then they're still saying, hey, no, you know, I think, you know, that this is a disclosable public record, and the city is saying, hey, no, we're not going to release it. And so I just want to be clear on that. And so it's important for me to know, again, is this the city saying ultimately, okay, we finally agree with the resident that this is a document that can be disclosed through FOIA, or is it the resident giving up and saying, you know what, you know, I agree, this cannot be disclosed. So knowing those differences will really help.
Yeah, and that's where I can jump in and answer, because those, I'm looking at them, and these are a number of the ones, I mean, they're all from my time. If they weren't from Clerk Mendoza's time, they're from my time. And looking at them, I can see that these were at least the vast majority of the ones that say resolved between parties, if not all of them, are cases where the city, in fact, turned over records in response that had previously not been turned over. I'm looking at, I'll use this for example, because he's a member of the media, Jonah Meadows, who has a number of PAC appeals here, and those records were later turned over, as well as others from residents that I'm familiar with.
And so I guess for the ones so 2021 are the new ones or is it 2020 and 2021? But I guess the new ones since, Clerk Mendoza, since you've been in office, are those, do you know what those are? Are we turning over records after the PAC opinion is filed, or what, in terms of the recent ones, what do you think how are those
So
being
the 2021 ones, I believe those are also an Alex before my time for these two. And those are just pending with PAC, I believe.
Yes, I believe Josh Irvine was also before Clerk Mendoza. I can't say for sure about which Mary Rosinski issue this was, but yeah, that sounds about right. So it seems all of the PAC appeals have been filed prior to Clerk Mendoza's time.
So that would be important, and then also just information on so somebody can file a request with the public access counselor, but also can sue in circuit court. So I'd also just love a report on that. How many people have sued the city, and what has been the results of those litigations. And I might have some other questions, but I'll hold for now.
Councilmember Burns, I believe Alex Ruggie is here from the law department and probably can answer those questions for you now if you'd like, unless you want something specifically in writing. The number of FOIA-related cases is not a lot, so I'm sure she could probably educate the committee on that pretty quickly.
Sure, Alex, if you want to answer the question regarding the number of lawsuits that are open, happy to hear that from you.
Sure, Chair Reed, members of the Rules Committee, Alex Ruggie, Assistant City Attorney. Currently, I believe we have one pending FOIA lawsuit. It was filed by Mary Rosinski and Councilmember Kelly regarding a Robert Crown FOIA from a couple years ago. There was a PAC appeal. The city has since been attempting to turn over documents, and that litigation is pending. Prior to that, we've had a FOIA lawsuit filed by Councilmember Burns that's been settled and closed. The city did turn over those documents. We also had a FOIA lawsuit recently that was filed regarding the reparations committee, and that was dismissed voluntarily by the plaintiffs in that case. So other than that, we don't have any other FOIA lawsuits.
Thank you, and that within the last few years. Thank you for that. That does leave me. So the information regarding lawsuits wasn't included here, and it seems as though at least one case that you mentioned, or two cases maybe, where the PAC gave a determination that the record should be disclosed, but they still seemingly weren't, evidenced by the fact that a lawsuit was filed. Do you know? Can you answer why? There was the extra step needed.
The city was preparing to turn over those documents, and the lawsuit was just filed before we were able to turn them over.
Okay, thank you. And then as I'm reviewing a number, so it's important to know that the resolve between parties typically means that that the PAC office has determined that at least some part of the request should be fulfilled. And then when I look at closed PAC, let's see. And I look at the number for closed beyond statutory time for appeals. There are a number that were closed or that were determined in the city's favor by technicality only because the statutory appeal time had expired, which is 60 days, which was, this is a number of cases where that has happened. As well as the, again, resolve between two parties, as well as there are a number of cases over the last few years where, folks have been, their PAC opinion has been issued. And of course, I hear that there is a delay in response in getting the records to folks. And that's a thing. I am curious, Clerk Mendoza, how many requests have been filed just for 2020 and 2021? Well, really for 2021.
Sorry, do you mean FOIA or PAC?
FOIA request. And I'm sorry, Councilman McKellar, if you have questions, please, you may hop in as well.
If you give me that 1 minute, I can actually give you that number. I'm logged in now.
Okay. And then I'm also thinking part of what the request was to get an understanding of the most common denials that are issued here. So I'd also like information at some point on that as well. Councilman Kelly, did you have any questions? And then we can wrap up this portion of the conversation pretty soon.
No, I just wanted clarification. What you were requesting.
So we've had 103 requests filed so far in the last 19 days.
And then what was the 2021 total of requests?
It's going to take me another second.
Okay.
For the first 19 days or the entire year?
For 2021, the entire year.
Sorry, apparently I can't use my computer.
No worries.
I can recommend that I can jump in. I believe it's over 1,600. So
yeah,
it was rather high in 2021.
Okay. Thank you. So it seems that FOIA requests have continued the pattern of increasing year over year, which I think is a good thing. It means that more folks are involved in our democracy. It's a good metric of community involvement, and I'm glad, Clerk Mendoza, you have been able to make some strides in reducing response time. So kudos to you on that. With that, this report will be filed with the Rules Committee, and I appreciate the update. Well, one, I guess, I always like to ask on issues of both FOIA and OMA, are there any suggestions that you have to improve internally the FOIA system?
Well, I feel right now we're doing what I think is needed, which is providing more training to staff on how to use our next request system. When I first started, we were providing a lot of just general help with next requests, like using the platform. And just I feel like the check-ins with the other FOIA officers has helped, and check-ins with everyone. I do want to ask the council if, just to improve the way we receive FOIAs and get FOIAs, it would be great if someone is having an issue, especially to prevent things from going to PAC or there being misunderstandings. If you have people just submit a FOIA request through our office, it's actually very simple. They can email us, they can call us, they can come and do it in writing. They can, do it via next request. And just having that and just kind of, not that I want council to be removed from it, but I just want you as council members to also respect the process and tell someone if they do want to request records that they do it directly through our FOIA, or through FOIA. That's why it's there for. It's for them. I think informing people that that's an avenue that they have instead of emailing me or calling me or anything like that is it's honestly easier for the person because they know they have to deal with our office, and it's easier for us to be able to track that person is served in a timely manner and in the way that they deserve. It did take us, for example, for one resident who we received an inquiry via a council member. I personally did not know that the inquiry was for a resident and not the council member. So I was going back and forth with the council member instead of the resident, and the council member took 3, 4, 5 days to respond to me. And then, so that FOIA request ended up being fulfilled, I believe, like 3, 4 weeks later, because I couldn't get a response from the council member. And that person could have been served within the 10 days, within the 10-day period, or even maybe the 5-day period, if I would have known, if I could have just communicated with that person. I understand everyone here has jobs and you guys have other responsibilities. I'm in this office all week. We have someone in here already. Utilize our office in the way that it should be utilized. Send people directly to us, and that will help us as, me as the city clerk and you as council members serve our residents in the way that they deserve. Just promote our process. I think people are using the FOIA next request and the process to get their documents, but I would appreciate if you also promote that process. And other than that, if no one has any other questions, I will hop off. I'm still at the Civic Center, so
Yes.
we'll be glad to get home.
If there are no further questions, thank you, Clerk Mendoza.
Chair, I just wanted to reiterate my
Oh,
interest.
sure, go ahead.
And just seeing, getting more information on the resolve between parties. And then, and I don't know if this is a law office or a clerk's effort, but maybe as part of those meetings, which are great. I'm glad you're coming together with the other FOIA officers, but including some of the public, the previous PAC opinions as part of those discussions, just so folks are familiarizing themselves with what the opinion was of the Public Acts Council, so we can see less and less of these FOIAs going there. So I think adding that to that huddle would really benefit all the FOIA officers.
Yeah, and I can meet with Alex and we can come up with a way to either post those or make them public, or have them where they're accessible for people. And Alex and I have also discussed maybe doing trainings even with the community, letting them know how they can, help us help them, and at the same time the other way around, because sometimes we are trying to track people down when they submit FOIA requests, and that makes the process very hard.
And then the Councilmember Burns, to go back and attempt to answer your question about the resolve between parties, I think it goes back to a lot of what Clerk Mendoza was saying, is just that sometimes there's a breakdown in communication, especially when you're doing it through a system like Next Request and it's on an online platform. It's honestly, I do believe that customer service starts at the front end when you communicate with people, but sometimes people don't do that in FOIA requests. And we were seeing that happen and the PAC appeals coming in. And then when we just sat down and talked to the requester, that's when the city was able to better understand and communicate with them the request and able to fulfill the request in a satisfactory manner. And then that's how those were closed. But resolve between parties, normally the only way the PAC is involved is they let us know. And then we let the PAC know, yes, we've resolved it. The person that appeals to the PAC confirms, yes, it's been resolved, and then the PAC closes it. So it truly is just a communication between parties to where we're both able to come to an agreement on the documents. And I'd say 99% of the time, it was just a miscommunication.
Yeah, I would slightly disagree with that. Just the 99% of the time, only because I looking at this list, I've seen a number that have to do with where there's just a difference of opinion, which is fine. Because some of the stuff was, great, but there are a number of issues where it was a difference of opinion, and the PAC office or others have chimed in, and their opinion has changed. So thank you very much for that.
I think moving forward, it's important to track that information. I think that's really important because, again, we have a bunch of resolve between parties, and then we have cities denial, non-binding, overturning cities' action.
There's very few upheld.
What's up?
There's very few that were upheld, it seems.
Right, exactly. It's just I was gonna, go through them, but just to keep it short, yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of areas that are. It's very clear that the city can, at least in the past, can strengthen the way it handles this, and so I just want to make sure that that we know what is really happening with the resolve between parties. And then also I want to clarify that in those meetings, those huddles, what I'm actually saying, I think the FOIA officers should go over the PAC opinion. So that's not something the community needs to understand. I think seeing as how a lot of these things resulted in the city doing something improper or whatever it was, I think that our FOIA officers need to make sure that they are caught up on all the PAC opinions. But that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we'll do that. Thank you, Councilmember Burns, for the feedback. And, I do want to just point out that a lot of, in my time, the last 8 months that I've been here, we really have not received anything. And then I've also made it an effort to contact PAC even if I have clarifying questions. And I try to work very closely with everyone, all of our FOIA officers, to make sure we're actively fulfilling requests and talking to community members as well. And we'll continue to do that. I'm not going to say it's perfect or it's going to be perfect, but I really do believe in high quality customer service, not only to our residents, but also internally. Because when we're helping staff fulfill FOIA requests, we're also making sure that there's a good communication on both sides. All communications now, and it is in my memo, is coming through our office. So if anybody has any questions about their FOIA request or anything regarding their request, all those questions are directed to us, so we know what's going on. They're no longer directed to staff, because what we were finding is that our emails, just get lost or phone calls are not answered. And if you read our report, you'll see that a lot of new things are coming through our office and through the system, through the Next Request system. So we're actively tracking the way that we serve our community members.
Thank you. And I will also just add one thing that my clerk's office did, and I think is really helpful for residents, is we would often recommend to residents to go to the PAC office if there was an appeal. And so, I think I would look at most of the residents there were folks that we recommended go to the PAC to have further discussion on these items. And then lastly, I'll say thank you, Clerk Mendoza. I brought this discussion here for this update. One, the previous council asked for this update to appear at rules on an annual basis, but also, it is the city council, the rules committee is the public body, and ultimately we are responsible for FOIA here in our city, and so it's just important that we stay on top of this and we ensure that as the public body that appoints the FOIA officers that work on our behalf, that we're making sure everything is done correctly. Okay, thank you. We will try to move through this agenda fairly quickly. Now, may I have a motion for item R1, adoption of ordinance 9022, amending Title II, Chapter 17 of the Evanston City Code to allow for members of the Reparations Committee to receive benefits from the Reparations Fund.
So moved.
Is there a second? A second moved by Councilmember Burns, seconded by Councilmember Nusma. I will open this up maybe to Nick to give a quick 1 or 2 minute just explanation. I think it's pretty straightforward. But
good evening, Councilmember Reed, members of the Rules Committee, Nicholas Cummings, Corporation Counsel. This ordinance was something that staff had been sort of kicking around with the previous subcommittee. And then now when the committee became permanent, or I should say the transition between the subcommittee to the new committee, where we were now introducing members from the community to be a part of the committee, if there were members on the committee that served on members of the community that served on the committee that could potentially be eligible, that they needed a way to actually be able to take part in the benefit, because right now it would potentially be a conflict of interest for them to receive the benefit. The way around it currently is if for some reason one of the members was selected to receive the benefit, they would have to recuse themselves from the committee and they could still receive the benefit. But I just, wanted to make sure that it was clear that in case someone who was eligible did receive the benefit, there would not be any sort of ambiguity as to whether it was an inappropriate gift to receive for someone who would be qualified as like an ancestor, like one of the members of the committee currently is, or as a descendant, as a couple other the members of the committee are.
Thank you, Nick. Council, not that I expect you to have anything, but Councilmember Braithwaite, if you want to say anything, feel free to. Otherwise, if there are no questions, I think.
Yeah, no, I just want to thank our staff, Nick, for working on this. There are three of us that serve on the committee, and the member that you're referring to is Carlos Sutton. And I would just say, I don't know if Mr. Sutton is on the line. The value that he brings as an ancestor has truly been appreciated on the committee. He is wise in his words, and he does bring a high level of legitimacy to the work that he does, because he brings that senior perspective. So I would hate, because of the color of his skin and any other reasons, that we would, based on our rules, create a barrier for him to take place. So thank you, Nick, and your department for crafting this. And I'm hoping that this will pass unanimously through our Rules Committee. Thank you, Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, thank you. I actually just have one question. I'm fully supportive of this. I think, again, given the specific thing here, given that it's reparations, and of course you want people who are affected to serve on the reparations committee. That would exclude just about every Black person in the city from serving on the committee, or they'd have to forego, being repaired. I do wonder if, and this is for maybe a separate time, but just to ensure that state law would not prohibit, an ancestor who serves on the committee receiving this. So I'm happy to update our local code, but just to double check to make sure we're not putting anyone in trouble with state law, because I have a bit of apprehension about that. But
I definitely, it's an excellent question or excellent point, Councilmember Reed. Generally speaking, the state law applies to those of us who are officers of the city or elected officials. But I will definitely look into it for those who serve on boards, commissions, and committees of municipalities to see if those state laws apply to them. Generally speaking, our ethics ordinance, when it comes to benefits and gifts, tracks the state code, but I will double check and make sure that's not an issue.
Okay, thank you. With that, it's been moved and seconded, and I don't. Apologies.
There were a couple of people that had hands raised.
Oh, my apologies. I did not see the hands. Councilmember Kelly. I think that's it.
I'm just wondering if there isn't any other sort of, I'm a little uncomfortable with this. Of course, Peter, your words, I agree, but just the format and the structure of this makes me uncomfortable. Is there any way that this can be modified to such an extent sort of going forward? So when people join this committee, that this isn't the case going forward, that you join and you're a recipient of, such an award. I think, the whole reparations process has been very exciting, and I can understand how this was not really thought out at the beginning. And so now here we are, and we don't want to preclude, like Mr. Sutton. But I'm just wondering if there's not some way to do this so that, new members, and I don't know, Nick, if there's some way to word this so that I just feel like this shouldn't be a thing now.
I certainly agree. And this really only came up with some urgency because of the drawing last week. Mm-hmm. And at this point, I believe there's still just numbers. There's very few people who actually know who was associated with those numbers. So I don't know who's received an award. Mm-hmm. I'm definitely open for suggestions on how another way to make this happen. But to Councilmember Reed's point, you kind of want people who are affected in the community to be able to participate in the committee. And right now, the alternative is they just can't vote on the actual, to recommend the award, right? They would have to recuse themselves from any vote to send to city council to approve the payment. Similar to, Councilmember Suffredin recusing himself when the Amazon stuff comes up, or Councilmember Newsom recusing himself when Gallagher Bassett comes up. So, I mean, that's how it would have to work now. And the problem is the way that it's structured and the way that the committee has designed it. We don't know who gets an award just yet. So they could vote to say the next meeting, I believe, is Thursday, the 2nd or 3rd of February. The committee could vote to say, these are the 16 people that were drawn. We need to send this to city council to approve payment. We still don't know who that is. And it could include Mr. Sutton, for example, and he voted on it, and he probably shouldn't have, but we don't know who's an awardee. So I'm open to suggestions on how to make this better. But this was the first instance, was to say, this award is not a gift under the ethics code, period. Like, they should be able to participate and it not be considered a gift and not considered, a conflict of their duties as on the committee, because we want people who are actually impacted or have been impacted to have some input on how this money should be spent serving on the committee.
Right.
But I'm open to suggestions. This is not like this is the only avenue. It's just this was what we came up. We actually came up with this last spring, but we were focused on actually trying to fashion the program. And so this ordinance did not get passed. And once the committee got to the point where they were ready to give awards, I said, wait a minute, we still need to do this.
Okay. Right. No, I can see that it's complicated to make, like you say, to have that important participation of those that would be recipients having a voice on the committee. So I understand the dilemma.
And I think I'm up next, right, Chair? Chair.
I did not realize I was muted. Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
And I just wanted to underscore the point that it is it's fundamental. Like it is. Some would argue that even the way the committee is arranged now is imperfect, in that I'm not sure if every member would be considered an ancestor or a descendant, because I think at least one member may not be, but it's fundamental. It's important that it's necessary. It's important. It's fundamental that in reparations, no matter which parties it injures, that they have a role in determining the harm and determining how the program is implemented. I think one thing that's different also is that the selection process is not done by the committee. It's so far it's been a random selection process that the committee, the committee did not select the individual recipients, and then I'm not even quite sure that the committee has to officially approve the recipients, because the process does that. So we might need to give some general direction, but I would counsel comments if you can look into that. I don't think the committee has to officially approve what happened at Fleetwood. I think that could really just go straight to council. And so I'd like some feedback on that, whether or not that's the case.
Regardless, if I can just say, regardless of that fact, the gift ban and the ethics, our internal ethics code would still need to be addressed, and so I think this does that. Sorry, Council Cummings.
That's fine. And I think Councilmember Braithwaite can address the random choice. I think it was done that way primarily because we have more people who are eligible than funding available. So as to be fair in who we actually provide benefits to, it was done as a random process instead of like this committee screening and actually voting to pick people.
And if I may, in the interest of time, I think there seems to be a consensus around this, and I think those questions maybe don't, or those answers wouldn't get at the heart of what Councilmember Kelly's concern is. And democratic rule is we don't need everyone to agree. So I would really entertain, just so we can get done with the meeting, moving forward with this, if everyone is okay with that.
Yeah, I would still like to respond to my question, but I'm fine.
Go ahead.
That being offline, that could be offline. I don't think I'm not.
We're taking up at our next committee meeting.
Yeah.
Councilmember Burns.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, with that, is Dart still here, or I'll just call the roll? Dart hopefully is home. Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
I feel my court days again. Councilmember Braithwaite. I'm sorry, Councilmember Burns. I meant to say Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton. Is he here? Okay. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Myself, aye. And then Mayor Biss.
Aye.
Okay. Well, the ayes have it. And I want to quickly move through the agenda. The next thing on the agenda is R2, which is, I don't think we have to have a big discussion about this. We discussed it at the last meeting. This is just that the mayor would announce a veto after a veto is issued. I think we all, there's a consensus around that, and that's why it's on the agenda. So may I have a motion for item R2?
Yeah, I'll move R2, adoption of resolution 7R22, amending City Council Rule 14.3 to require the mayor to announce mayoral veto at the City Council meeting immediately following the veto.
I will second that.
Okay. Is there any discussion?
Just want to point out to the committee, just very briefly, this only amends the City Council rules. It does not address the city code with respect to mayoral veto.
Okay,
I just want to point that out because that was my understanding of the direction that was given at the last rules committee meeting.
Okay, yeah, I think we should update the code as well, so it's clear to whoever the next mayor is what their responsibilities are, not just in the rules, but that can be done at a later time. I think the rules is the first place. So if there's no further discussion, I will call the roll. Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed. Aye. And then Mayor Biss.
Aye.
Okay. And then moving very expeditiously through the agenda is item R3, a discussion regarding compensation for council members. Is there a motion on that?
What is that again?
R3, discussion regarding.
Yeah, I think it's just that. So yeah, motion to discuss compensation for elected officials.
And really, I'm sorry, this is kind of worded incorrectly. It's an additional stipend for council members, but yes. Is there a second to that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, is there a second?
Can I ask a question?
Can you second and then we can discuss it?
Sure, I'll just say that I'm hesitant to second it because I think it'll be a long discussion. And can we put it on another agenda? And I mean, we've been, almost 3 hours now, so.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to have this placed on the next Rules Committee agenda. So if there's a motion to do that, to move this.
Reed, as a chair, if you'd like to just carry it over to the next Rules Committee agenda, you can.
I will not be chair at the time, so I think it's best that there's an official committee action, so it will be placed on the agenda.
Understood.
Yeah, I moved to place R3 discussing Discussion regarding elected officials' compensation to the next Rules Committee meeting on.
I don't think we have a date yet, but for
the next Rules Committee meeting.
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, we'll move that to the next agenda. We'll do a roll call here as well. Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
No.
Councilmember Newsma.
No.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember, no, I'm blanking. Councilmember Ravel.
No.
Councilmember Reed, aye. And Mayor Biss.
No.
Okay. All right. And then finally, item R6, discussion regarding filling vacancies of elected office.
Mr. Chair, I move item R6 to enable discussion regarding the filling of vacancies in elected office.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Moved by Mayor Biss, seconded by Councilmember Newsma. I will introduce this. So I requested that this be on the agenda. I think, state law is, I don't want to say clear, but the state law exists on this issue. It's somewhat clear. I think at this point, we can have Councilor Cummings give any updates that he wants to give. But I think state law is fairly clear on what has to be done. But I think beyond state law, there is our own city practices and how we fill vacancies. And so first, if we just want to, I'll turn over to Mayor Biss or Councilor Cummings, but if we first just want to lay out what the state law mandated process is, which I think is fairly straightforward. And then, a little layer deeper than that, what Mayor Biss, what your intention is within that framework for filling, particularly we have a vacancy for the 9th Ward, but I think we should begin looking at a policy for filling vacancies overall in elected office. And so, Councilor Cummings, do you just want to first briefly walk through state law? I think you can maybe do that in a minute or two.
I will try and make this as brief as possible. Good evening again, Chair Reed, members of the Rules Committee, Nicholas Cummings, Corporation Counsel. So state law is as clear as Illinois state law can be with respect to filling of vacancies. With respect to resignation, there are two different types of vacancies. There can be abandonment of office and resignation. There are two types of resignation, which is unconditional and conditional. Both of them require notice sort of in writing. And then it triggers all of the provisions in state law wherein the mayor, at least in the city of Evanston, it would be the mayor, sometimes it would be the village president or a board of trustees, but it would be that chief executive official would be charged with appointing someone to fill that vacancy. This same goes for if Clerk Mendoza for some reason decided to resign, the mayor would have to pick a new clerk. And then the city council, and the question came up during public comment, who are the corporate authorities? The city council would then have to confirm sort of this person that was appointed by the mayor. If that person does not receive a majority vote, the mayor has to pick again. And if that second person doesn't get a majority vote, the mayor just picks one of those two until city council can agree on who is actually qualified to fill the position. It is my assumption that the mayor would probably meet with the members of city council to see if the mayor would have the votes before appointing someone. So we probably wouldn't see the where we would have like 3 rounds of trying to confirm someone. But the mayor is the person who actually gets to pick the person who fills the seat. The mayor has to pick that person based on qualifications outlined in state law. They have to be a resident of the city for at least a year. They have to be a resident of the ward for at least a year. They can't be in debt to the city. Those are basically the 3 things. Those are very similar to what the city code requires you to be an elected alderman. I think our city code also requires you not to have a felony or something of that nature in your background. but state law only requires sort of those three things. And the city council has to approve that person within 30 days of the appointment. If that 30 days passes, I think the person, the mayor just has made the appointment, similar to if the city council does not approve one of the two people that was presented, that person would continue to serve until city council actually does sort of approve them under a state code. Because if there is a resignation that's effective at least 130 days before the next general municipal election, scheduled under general election law, and that there are at least 28 months left in a term, there will be an election for the vacancy at the next general municipal election as outlined by state law. Evanston's municipal election is not until 2025. However, state law does have a municipal election scheduled every 2 years. So there is a municipal election in 2023. So in the instant case regarding the 9th Ward, there will be an election for the 9th Ward council member in 2023 that will follow the primary schedule. I believe, hopefully we'll be back on a normal schedule for petitions and primaries. 2022 is a little off because we don't have a primary until like June or something like that. But the petition schedule will probably start in the fall of 2022, and then we'll actually have a primary in February and election in March. So that's it when it comes to state law, or March or April.
Yes, February and April. Thank you, Council Cummings. Mayor Biss.
Yeah, just want to highlight a couple. There's a little bit of kind of odd stuff there. So this will be the only municipal election that occurs, the only city of Evanston election that occurs in 2023. So there'll be stuff going on. There's going to be a school board election, but as you'll recall, those never trigger February primaries, whereas municipal elections do. And so if the 2023 field has enough candidates to trigger a primary, then God help us all, there's going to be a 9th Ward only February primary for that council race in 2023. Because of the primary, it means the folks running in this race, as you'll recall, have slightly different petition schedules than the school board numbers. So there's just going to be this funny election floating out there of a type we've never had before in the city of Evanston. Just two other points I want to quickly make before answering your question, Mr. Chair. First of all, Council Member Nusma raised the important question of the redistricting. We've talked about redrawing the map because a census has occurred and the wards are pretty different population. That's something that I'm really strongly supportive of doing. You can't really do that before the election, though, because if you redraw the map, then you got to hold the election in the new map, but then you're holding the 9th Ward election in a new map, but the 8 folks representing wards 1 through 8 are representing old districts, and you've got overlap and so forth. So I would request
I'm sorry, I'll let you finish now.
Yeah, I would request that the folks working on redistricting do it with that calendar in mind, and I would recommend that the goal be to complete and pass a map shortly after the 2023 election. So on the one hand, you don't have 2 different maps in the air during the 2023 election, which would make a weird, confusing election even more weird and confusing. But on the other hand, you do it fast enough to give as much time as possible before the 2025 election. The other point that I wanted to make, and I already see Councilmember Braithwaite's hand raised, is that it's nice if you'd ask me my opinion, Mr. Chair, but of course there's 2 real experts on this issue on our council, Council Members Braithwaite and Revelle, who've gone through this process, and so I think it might be interesting to hear from them as well. Councilmember Fleming is no longer with us because she had a previous commitment. She's having a ward meeting, as some of you know, on Saturday morning. The intent will be to publish the full process and for her to share at that ward meeting. So, these are conversations that she and I are having on an ongoing basis. But I think a few things are really critical. I think it's important that we have an open application process, that there be an application online. Anybody can fill it out. Nobody gets to be considered if they don't fill it out. And anybody who does fill it out will have a one-on-one conversation with me. I think it's useful to have a public component of the process. For instance, Councilmember Revelle has told me about a component that she went through when Mayor Tisdall appointed her. I think it's unwise to make a commitment until we see the size of the applicant pool, whether that process include every applicant or just a list of finalists, because you want to construct a process that actually helps the community get information. And the best way to do that will depend on, if there's 3 applicants, you probably want to put them all in a public process. If there's 30, you almost certainly don't. And so, the important things for me to do are to devise a timeline for the application form to be published, and then to set a deadline, and then to establish the mechanism by which either all the applicants or the finalists will be a part of the opportunity for public phase of the process. And the other thing I didn't say, and I don't believe that our Corporation Counsel mentioned, is that Councilmember Fleming's resignation letter has now been filed, and the resignation is effective February 15th. So she will be participating in our next 2 council meetings, January 24th and the much beloved Valentine's Day meeting. Because she was so generous as to give us a nice long runway, that gives us the opportunity to do a lot of this work while she's still in office, so that we can have a process where I'm really giving folks a chance and time and listening to them carefully and thinking about the decision deeply, but also moving pretty quickly after she's gone, so that the Ninth Ward residents don't have to go without representation for almost any time at all. So that's kind of that's where I stand. And again, I think all of us would benefit from learning from Council Members Revelle and Braithwaite about their experiences that they went through and what they thought. We stand to learn from those, and that's what I know.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Biss. Councilmember Braithwaite, go ahead.
I was just going to offer the floor to Councilmember Revelle.
Councilmember Revelle.
Or if you want me to share first, it doesn't matter.
Yes, well, when the vacancy in the 7th Ward occurred, Mayor Tisdall convened, I'd say it was a fairly informal process, but she basically let it be known that she was going to be holding I guess basically like a ward meeting, and invited residents to come to the meeting to talk with her about what they were looking for in their next alderman. And at that meeting, she invited anyone present who was interested in being appointed to talk for a couple of minutes about their, why they wanted to serve and what their vision was for Evanston. And so I'd say there were at least 6, maybe 7 of us who stood up and shared a few remarks. And then I don't believe that evening she made any kind of formal decision, but then soon after that, she went to council and proposed that I fill the vacancy.
Thank you, Councilmember Revelle. Councilmember Braithwaite, or I'm sorry, are there any questions for Councilmember Revelle as a response to? Okay, if not, then Councilmember Braithwaite.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Reed and Mayor. I'd agree. It was a very similar process, and I do think for anyone going through it, and it doesn't matter whose ward that there is that informal ward meeting. If nothing else, there were some things that I followed with my predecessor, the now Judge Lionel Jean-Baptiste, and it's a wonderful opportunity for anyone who would be appointed or is interested just to hear from the residents and be able to respond to some of those questions. So to Councilmember Reed and also to Corporation Counsel Nicholas, I think if we are making the changes and talking about it, I think it would be critical that we institutionalize, the public meeting of some sort. We don't have to hammer that out tonight, but just that there's a meeting where residents will have an opportunity to share their thoughts of what's important to them. So whomever is walking into this position, comes with somewhat of a roadmap and an understanding of what's important to the residents at that given time.
Thank you, Councilmember Braithwaite. I see Councilmember Kelly, you're unmuted. I don't know if that's because you're.
Oh, sorry. Well, I did have a question. I'm unclear. Are we obligated to have elections either way in 23 for this?
Yes.
Okay, so either way there will be an election. Okay.
And the idea, the rule is, I think it's a good law. The law says, hey, listen, the residents need representation, so we'll have this quick mechanism where I make an appointment to fill the vacancy. But as soon as it's reasonable, you want the residents to pick their council member, not me. And so because there's a municipal election happening anyway in April of 23, have it then so the residents can have their voice heard.
Okay.
And it should be pointed out, I think I missed that when I gave my synopsis, that the person that is elected in 2023 will serve until 2025 when all of you are back up for election or the positions are up for election. So it'll only fill the remaining 2 years of the term.
The vacancy.
Yeah, and then have to run again if they choose to do so.
Mayor Biss, there's a point, and I blanked where I interrupted you, and I deservingly now forgot my question. Do you happen to remember what you were saying when I?
Yeah, I was talking about the redistricting ramifications.
Okay, yeah.
I wanted to weigh in on that as well. So.
Okay, first, Councilmember Newsom, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify the mayor's statement about having maps not be released until after the 2023 election. I just want to make sure you would be comfortable or not having tentative maps be in circulation prior to that date. Or were you concerned just about a final decision being made, which it absolutely makes sense not to officially redistrict until after that election, but there may be draft maps circulating prior to the election, unless you think that's a bad idea.
I think it's fine to play it by ear. I mean, we might, depending on how things are playing out, we may want to wait until petitions are filed so you don't literally confuse a candidate, you know? But I don't come to the table, you know, here in January of 22 with a strong view on that. I'm sure we can all work through that together in a way that we'll agree on.
And I'd like to get the redistricting process done by the end of 2023.
Yeah, I agree.
So we certainly have time, but I don't want to wait forever to start it. And if we're going to get it done by the end of 23, I'd like to start it. We'll have to be working on it far enough in advance, probably prior to the election in the spring of 23. So we'll just have to be careful about communication and just make sure it's absolutely clear to the community.
Yes, the point that I was going to make is I certainly, well, one, I will just say I may disagree with the opinion that if we were to adopt a new ward map, that there would be one ward map in existence for the 9th ward or one ward boundary in existence for the 9th ward and then a separate in existence for the other wards. I think it makes sense to wait until after the 2023 elections, but certainly I also would think it would make sense to have maps floating around before then, and without confusing people. I think that folks that we can educate folks, and I think our new clerk can do a good job of making sure that just one ward understands what their boundaries are and what they have to do and what they should not do, as opposed to a citywide confusion. I was going to say to Councilmember Braithwaite's point about institutionalizing this. That is the point. I think what I'm hearing here from the group is that certainly there seems not to be opposition to institutionalizing a process. One, it seems that a process that includes an open application and some kind of open form, and that the mayor can determine how those things work, are two things that there seems to be at least there doesn't seem to be any strong opposition to either of those two things. And I think those two things make sense as far as, if we're going to institutionalize something, I think those two things make sense to institutionalize. Again, that there's an open process for applying and that there is an open process for reviewing some subset or some, either all or some subset of candidates as determined by the mayor publicly. And then, of course, state law kicks in as far as what the council's duties and responsibilities are and whether or not an election would exist. Is there any further comments on this?
Councilmember Kelly had it for a while, and I have.
Oh, sorry.
So just
okay,
if I like at my ward meeting tomorrow, if folks ask what is the process, so that hasn't been determined yet. I just want to make sure I'm clear on what the process is. If they're asking what's the process, like can people write us?
I can't give you a document with a timeline, but I've made a commitment that there will be an open application that is available to the community. That is the way people apply, because I want to avoid, hey, let me apply by just making a phone call because I know you. So there'll be an open application process that'll be done online. It'll be visible to the whole community, and that at the latter stages there will be a public facing component to the process.
Okay, so that'll be probably in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, I think even Councilmember Fleming's Saturday ward meeting, my hope is to be able to give her something with more detail, again, with dates on it, and by this date this happens, by this date this happens, by this date this happens, that she can share, just in 3 days from now.
Okay, great, thank you.
Oh, and okay, Mayor Biss.
Look, I don't have super strong feelings. I would just urge us to be cautious about what we institutionalize, because I think that expectations evolve, right? So, for instance, I don't think Mayor Tisdall did anything wrong. In fact, I think she did everything right with these and was open. But there wasn't an online web form to use to apply, because that technology existed, but it wasn't sort of the way everything was done the way it is now. And so I guess if it's the will of the committee and the council to put something in the rules or the code, I don't have a strong objection to it, but I want it to be written in a flexible way so that we don't write a rule for January 2022 technology and expectations that winds up being kind of a little bit of a bad fit in just 3 or 4 years, and then we've got to come back and scramble and fix it. I think the goals of transparency and public input are really critical, and if we want to institutionalize those, fine. If we want to take the position that we don't see a problem and therefore there's no need for a change, that's fine too. But let's just not be too prescriptive in a way that would hold us back.
Yeah, certainly. My recommendation is to, again, I at least what I was laying out didn't include any technology component. It was just that there will be an open application process, whether that takes place on papyrus or whether it takes place in a database, and that there would be an open community forum as well. The only thing that I think makes sense to, and what I think those 2 particular things achieve are exactly what you said you wanted to avoid. And we're lucky to have, yourself as our mayor, someone who's committed to transparency. But, I'd say we get another mayor, at whatever period, and that mayor just wants to handpick someone and doesn't want to go through a public process. I think that's the only standard, that there is an open, transparent process that we should put into, institutionalize, and then how that plays out. I was even, careful. I attempted to be careful in, you suggested that, if there are 30 people apply, that you should have flexibility to determine that, your top 3 or 4 or whatever go on to a public hearing. And I think that flexibility can be maintained, but just that there should be some public form or process and a public application. That's it. I'm sorry, let me double check for hands. I'm on a phone. I do not see any further hands. So if it is the will of this committee, I would like, after this process is done, to bring forward to a rules committee meeting. Councilmember Braithwaite will be chair at the time, but just a few rules that would set this in, set the transparency aspect of this in stone, and still allow flexibility for the mayor to lead in the way that the state code allows, but also set the expectation of Evanston residents to have a transparent, open process. Silence is consent in government. So I guess that is consent that this will come back to another agenda with those components sometime after the after we've had a fresh update in the lessons of appointment, from this cycle. I'm hearing a mic, so if anyone wants to chime in. Okay, if that is it, then I'm sorry. I know Councilmember Kelly received a message from you. Did you have a question regarding committees?
No. I didn't have my hand up.
Councilmember Reed, there was just only one other thing that I did not get a chance to discuss in R4 or R5, and that is the city does have one OMA-related lawsuit. That lawsuit was brought by Edgar Powell over the Board of Ethics having failed to review its executive session minutes within, I forget the timeline right now, but there's a certain timeline once we become aware that they have to review it. They're supposed to review it. They didn't review within the 6 months because they have to review it every 6 months. And then once we became aware of it, I think it's like within 60 days, they have to review it. The earliest opportunity we had for the Board of Ethics to review those closed session minutes was October 2020. They were reviewed, they were released. Edgar Powell still sued. And so that lawsuit is still pending. Even after the PAC told us at the earliest convenience, review the executive session minutes, and it's exactly what the Board of Ethics did. We were still sued. So that lawsuit is pending. And I wanted to make the committee aware of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Cummings. I just looked back at my messages. Council Member Kelly, you did ask me earlier about the committee chair schedule for non-standing committees. And so
Hey, Devon, you're frozen.
I will just say for the record, Ms. Frenchel did send out a reminder on the schedule. So I don't know if there was a question on the schedule.
Okay, now I remember. I think I was just to say for, that the finance and budget also follow the standard 6-month rotation. We discussed that before, either at council or rules. So I think that was it,
sorry.
Right?
I missed it. These darn iPod headphones, I think I touched my ear and hung up. So I'm sorry. So if you can take 2 seconds to repeat your question, and I can.
So I believe it was about just scheduling our finance and budget so it follows the standard 6-month rotation. And that was already brought up and discussed before and agreed to in council or rules, but I think it just never got formalized.
Yeah, I think it did. What I'll say is that we adopted a committee chair rotation schedule, which, for the standing committees, it's 4 months per, chairmanship. I think for the non-standing committees, it seems that the standard is about 6 months per non-standing committee. And the way that we rotate is based on seniority, and we've created that seniority list. It'll be obvious with the new council member where they fit into it. They'll slot into the bottom in the 9th slot, which is fitting for the 9th ward. And so particularly for, I think you mentioned finance and budget and economic development and all of the other, non-standing committees that are directly reporting to council, we'll use that. So I think for finance and budget, to myself, you, Jonathan, Councilmember Burns, the seniority chart that we chose would put me next up to chair finance and budget, and then we'd go down the list based on seniority. And for all of the other committees, it's the same kind of workflow. So we can maybe have that formalized and put into a spreadsheet, and that can be presented. But it's already been adopted, and we can just have it in writing somewhere.
I would hate to have to go back to the drawing board now that we're going to have a new seniority ranking.
We wouldn't have to go back to the drawing board. We'd simply slot them into where they would fall into the system. So if we're saying because the new 9th ward council member
Well, there was some adjustment so that we wouldn't have council members chairing multiple committees. So, I mean, my simple question is, when is Councilmember Fleming? When would she have been scheduled to chair a committee?
Well,
I don't have the list in front of me. Dar Franchelno sent out the revised schedule. There's multiple committees I think Councilmember Fleming is on, so I don't have it all.
Well, that'll completely
really
change one because
just-
Councilman. Yeah, sorry.
I know it's a little unfair, but I would urge us to slot the new person into Councilmember Fleming's roles just to avoid, I mean, all of the juggling that we had to do to set this in the first place.
Well, here's why I say I thought that too. But also that, seniority thing, it wouldn't make sense for the newest person to jump in her spot. But the other thing is, that person is free to choose what committees they want to serve on, just as Councilmember Fleming. And Councilmember Fleming currently only serves on, I think, 2 committees. And that person may want to serve on more. They may want to serve on less, on different committees. So we'll have to kind of rejigger the whole thing anyhow, because someone new will be serving on new committees.
I don't agree with that, for what it's worth, but this is probably not the time to have it out.
Okay, yeah. Okay. But as far as to Councilmember Kelly's question, regardless of the fact, we can have that presented so it's clear on the other committees, and then we can figure out later how we slot the new 9th Ward council member into the committee schedule at another point.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I see no further business before us. The January 19th meeting of the Rules Committee is hereby adjourned.